This is a questionable reality production.
Hello, I'm Xander Crowns, and this is AP Post History. Now let's get started. Today we'll be covering topic 3.3, Fractured Society. So, society found itself divided between the Textile Society, the Tawads, the Commonwealth of the Commons, and Bigger Texas. With each having marginally different cultures, not really to an appreciable extent, but a mentionable extent. And you may ask, why the emphasis on the marginally different now? Well, since these nations are all birthed from the same motherland, it was more of an accentuation of already existing slight regional difference than any profound cultural shifts. So, in general, they were all still Samnites at heart, even if they didn't like salmon. And since they were all essentially still Samnites, they maintained the ways of the salmon despite the best efforts of many to eliminate such from the world. And I mean, what could you expect? Salmon will beget salmon, even if future generations are not all that keen on the whole salmon thing. Here is an illustrative example of their regional differences. In the Textile Society, a carbonated beverage was called a pop. In the Commons, it was called that weird pop drink. Among the Tawads, it was pop with exactly no salmon in it, which was actually quite a common thing back then. Well, Bigger Texas took a different route and abstractly represented pop with a color instead of a word. But that is the only example of that particular eccentricity. There are, of course, several other dialectical differences between these nations, accompanied by somewhat different accents. A favorite example to me is the differences in pronouncing caramel, where it could be caramel, motor vehicle mill, automobile mill, and of course, horseless carriage mill. All these examples are in fact spelt the same. It's quite weird. They ate different brand types and shopped at different types of stores, but ultimately, when boiled down to it, these nations are really just kind of the same on a cultural level. Even in relation to the Commons with their uniquely distinct government, but otherwise, your standard democratic republic setup was the usual flavor of organization, and regardless of the organization, the culture did not really significantly vary. And I think it would be important to talk where exactly these societies were identical. Firstly, there was a pronounced preponderance to despise salmon and all of its form. And after so many long years of Samnite rule where it was mandated just about everything include a reference to a salmon, one could see about why people had reached peak salmon. And while there was, of course, still reverence to the salmon that made up the salmoning, of course, people no longer wanted a salmon-framed way of life. And so those salmon artworks were burned. Those statues toppled. Those frescoes scrubbed clean. While in the inverse relationship, people increasingly got caught up in romanticizing about the pre-apocalyptic era. And a large part of this overt romanticization was the conscious efforts to reclaim and re-establish parts of that lost way of life. Archaeological research entered into a heyday, so to say, with eyes turned towards history rather than the unraveling drama of post-history. The topic of history was the most interesting to the people at the time. This development, though, would be somewhat frustrating to future generations who would over-idealize the Samnites instead and wish more was taken to preserve their heritage. A large part of this concentrated effort was the restoring of the great diversity of media prevalent before the salmoning. Primarily that strand of entertainment and information hybrid that is news programming. And so pundits, crude graphics, over-the-top dramatic reporters, and all the likes were skillfully recreated and adjusted to describe these modern times. The problem was that these modern times were not all that interesting. with a distinct lack of national character prevalent. A lot of readers and viewers would end up disappointed by the uninteresting going-ons of their day-to-day life. But nonetheless, they would strive to recreate media in every regard and everything else that went along with it. And that's it. Topic 3.3 is complete. If you want to find success in your post-history class and get some automobile mail, which is actually quite tasty, consider subscribing and liking this video. My goal is to see each and every one of you get a 92 in your class and a 7 on the AP exam in Quintober. Alright, Xander Crowns, checking out.